This evening is Terry Songs out.
I'm your fearless leader, and I think all I'm supposed to do right now is to ask Mark to ask for introductions.
Yep. Perfect. So a couple things that we want to say, as we always say, is the meeting, it's as a hybrid format, is being recorded tonight. So that'll be recorded as we come along. And then I want to go ahead and invite introductions around the room. And I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Mark. You can introduce yourself and the position you have.
Thank you, Mark Farah, developer builder 1.
Andy Haugen, District 4.
George Marsh, Ag 1.
Alan Jesse, Ag 2.
Gwen Fee, Environment 1.
Elaine Stewart, Environment 2.
Stu Peterson, Business 2.
Diane Taniguchi Dennis, Clean Water Services, and I'm glad to be back amongst you. I have a new bionic knee. Brand new knee, so it's good to see all of you.
Joe Gall with Clean Water Services.
Matt Wellner, I'm the other builder developer rep.
Good, I'm Mark Jockers. I'm the former chief of staff. I'm actually just back here under contract helping out with my last CWAC meeting.
I'm Jody Newcomer, technical. Stephanie Morrison, Administrative Program Manager for Clean Water Services.
Mike, do you want to?
Mike McKillop, representing District 3.
Andy Braun, the Systems Planning Division Manager and Regional Utility Services Department.
Rick Shanley, I'm an interim engineering and water technology director.
Josh Johnson, Engineer with Treatment Plant Services. Logan Holmes, Chief Utility Operations Officer.
Chief Business Operations Officer.
Anna Lee, Executive Assistant to the Office of the CEO. We have a Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you very much.
Great.
For that all.
Mark?
Yes. Oh, well, I'm sorry, Alex. I'm really sorry. Alex, you can introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Alex Fan, District 1. Did you hear me okay?
Yep, very good. Thank you, Alex.
So just, does anybody have any questions or changes to the minutes from the last meeting? There's like November 8th, 2023. With that, we'll stay with third up. And then our first primary agenda item is to select a chair and vice chair for 2024.
So I guess we're gonna open the floor for nominations on that. I know I've talked with a few folks here, but we'd welcome any nominations. So.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'd like to nominate Alex for chair.
Okay, we have a nomination for Alex. Any other nominations? Anybody oppose Alex being chair for 2024? Looks like you should have showed up to the meeting, Alex.
Yeah, that's what happens when you miss me when you're not there, right? But I mean, I'm not surprised, but yeah, I'm not against me doing it. I just want to say, like, transparently, I shared this with some other folks, but you know, I do have a young family and I do my best, of course, to manage my schedule and I prioritize these meetings, of course, but I'll always do my best to be in person, but you will have to live with me through this format sometimes if I'm chair.
Thank you, Alex.
I think you already are. We need a nomination for vice chair. I'd be willing to serve as vice chair in 2024 if nobody opposes.
So moved.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you very much. And Alex, we're gonna go ahead and have Matt share the meeting through the balance of today since he's here, and then you'll pick up the gavel, so to speak, at our next meeting.
Sounds great.
Thank you very much.
So next we move on to Kathy to nominate firm budget committee members.
Good evening, Kathy Leader, Chief Financial Officer, and also the Budget Officer for Clean Water Services. And here once again this year, usually every year, looking for nominations for our budget committee for Clean Water Services. We're required by state law to have a budget committee, so only a budget meeting and a public hearing and allow for public comment on our budget. So the Budget Committee for Clean Water Services is made up of 10 members. 5 of those are our existing Board of Directors for Clean Water Services, and the other 5 are a citizen group, which just so happens because of the bylaws for CWAC come from the membership of CWAC itself. The members serve a 3-year term, and they must live in Washington County. This gives you the timeline on the budget committee, so the commitment that's there on the budget committee itself. We're here today, January 10th, getting the nominations from CWAC to take to the board for one position we have right now. February 6th, we have a work session with the board where we bring the nominees forward and they can collaborate on that, discuss. Then we bring a final action to the board on March 5th for the appointment to the budget committee. April 19th this year, so 3 weeks before the budget committee meetings, the district's going to issue out the proposed budget to the members. So you have 3 weeks in order to review the document. It's the first time we have that long of a period for review. So hopefully that gives you a definite amount of time to review through. And then the budget committee meeting is May 9th. So that's the first meeting that's held for the public to come and make comment on the budget, and the departments and programs then present on their different budget areas. What the budget committee, their duty is to hear public comment, to hear the budget message, and then to make a final approval of the budget document itself. That then goes to a public hearing before the board June 18th, where a final hearing, once again, another opportunity for public comment, but a final decision and adoption of the budget for the next fiscal year. Right, so this, right, is our 2023 committee, right, that was in effect last year, the great outline for Terry. Terry Song, he was our chair and also one of the budget members. He is off the committee now, and his term expired as of the 23rd. So that's the position we're looking to fill. We do have, 4 other thank you members that are participating on the budget committee. Alex Van, with the term through the 9/30/24. Matt Weller, term through September 2024, Mark Farrar, term through 9/30/2025, and Elaine Stewart with the term through 9/30/2025. So we're filling Terry's position that we filled, it would expire in 9/30/2026, so a 3-year term, and we try to stagger them so we have a consistent list of members that have been on, familiar with the budget process. I will say, being on the budget committee, it's a great opportunity to get a really good understanding of clean water services, our priorities, and our strategic plan, because that's where we spend our money. So it's a really good committee to be on and really learn a lot. And the presentation that is done by the group at the budget committee that we've always had really favorable response. It's very, very engaging, very interesting, and it's a great way to learn a lot about the district itself. So highly recommend. So with that, I open it up for any nominations for budget committee. We got one position, like I said, the term would be through 9/30/2026.
Kathy, one point of clarification, that person has to be a resident of Washington.
Yes, and they do have to be a resident.
So they're not like you're. So you're up for the plan.
The opportunity.
You missed that.
Nominate Andy Howard.
I was actually going to nominate you, Steve.
Arm wrestling.
Lose, you lose. I don't live in Washington County.
Yeah.
I work in Washington County.
It's time well spent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've watched one of the meetings. It's really a time.
Andy, are you willing to serve? Just so I'm clear, so we would essentially have one meeting on May 9th.
You'll get a binder like 2 weeks before. It's a thick binder.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
And just so you know, the meeting on that is during the day,
It's an all-day meeting.
a majority of the day.
Yeah.
And it's a Thursday. It's a Thursday.
On a Friday, but it's Thursday this year.
That's what the entire board is there.
Let me just make sure. I mean, your students. Kentucky Derby time?
You could.
You can get breakfast and lunch. Yeah.
You can see you in action.
I think I could probably do that. I would just have to make sure I could get off work. I'm already doing the West Basin master plan, but I think I could swim.
Yeah, so do we do a second?
Does anybody object to Andy being on the committee?
I'll pay for, we have it.
Oh, Andy.
Wendy.
Thank you, Smith.
Exactly. So next agenda item is with Rick, Josh, and Andy, and it's the West Basin Master Plan update.
Well, thanks. It's good to be back. It's probably been 6 months or so since we had our first meeting. I know the weather was a whole lot nicer than it is today or probably this weekend. I'm going to kick it off and kind of introduce what we're going to talk about tonight. So the first item is to go through phase one, but before that, Andy's going to give us sort of an overview. We got a lot of questions about bigger picture planning and how do we approach this stuff. So we're going to walk you through what we call our strategic approach, which is the very highest level that sets our vision, how the West Basin plan fits into some of the other planning efforts that we have, recycled water, sub-basins, and so forth. So a little bit of background on planning specific to clean water services, and our holistic approach to doing that. The phase one part, will be done by Josh, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the goals again to make sure we're all aligned on the goals and how we're gonna look at the alternatives. We got some good feedback last time on making sure we've got a broad perspective as we look at the things to consider when we're talking about alternatives. And there'll be a subcommittee update. Logan's gonna introduce that concept. It's been a real pleasure, and we've had some good focus time with the subcommittee last year. And let them share some of the things that we worked on together. And after that, we'll get through phase two, give you a little background of what we've been working on and then the next steps. So
Pause for a second.
I can pause, yeah.
So Ramesha, we see that you've joined us here. Can you hear us all right?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. A crazy mistake, I can tell you a long story about it, so sorry I'm late there.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my work is done for me after that.
Thank you, Rick. And I'm Andy Braun, Systems Planning Division Manager. So we wanted to just orient you again to what we started talking about 6 months ago, back during the summer when we first introduced the West Basin Master Plan to you. So again, just talking about this and looking at the area that this covers. Some of you have been on CWAC for a while, back when we were actually finishing up the East Basin Master Plan. That's the area of which is shown in orange here. So that's all the flow that goes to the Durham treatment plant. So we wrapped that up in 2021 and then moved on to the next part of the basin, which we refer to as the West Basin. And it really encompasses 3 different treatment plants, the Forest Grove plant, the Hillsborough plant, and the Rock Creek plant. So that tributary area is shown in green. So that's what really the area that we're focusing on as we talk about the West Basin Master Plan. So as Rick mentioned, we wanted to step back and kind of take a bigger picture here. I think when we introduced this back during the summer, we kind of dove right into the West Basin plan. And there are a lot of questions about how this fit into the larger overall environmental picture. So this is an opportunity to kind of step back and take a look at that. I think the subcommittee that Logan will talk a little bit about kind of got an introduction to this and what are the other planning efforts that dovetail with the sanitary master plan. So there are a number of different things that we're doing, and they all kind of fit and merge together. So we're talking about the sanitary basin plans here. We also work on stormwater basin strategies. So it's a little bit different. We don't actually have a storm sewer or a storm master plan, but we're working on these strategies for our different subbasins. That ties very closely to some of the questions that Elaine asked about the environmental aspects of this. So I have another plan there that dovetails with this. And that ties closely to our ecological enhancement strategies too. So stormwater is a couple different parts. There's the open conveyance, the open streams. That's kind of that ecological side, as well as the surface water management or the storm sewer side, which are both rolled into the sub-basin strategies. And then there's water quality that rolls into all of these different plans and is considered. So those are all ones that Clean Water Services leads, but then these also work very closely with other planning efforts that our partners lead. So when we talk about other regional plans, these could be led by our local partners, the cities, doing land use plans and concept plans. Different areas are brought into the urban growth boundary. Each work on transportation plans as well. And some of these are led by Metro. Metro actually convenes everybody to put together a Metro-wide transportation plan. And then there are other conservation partners, THPRD, who work on various conservation plans. So none of these are done in a vacuum, and there's some overlap among all of them. Together, they really constitute the planning efforts. And then as all of these different plans are worked on, there are a lot of these considerations. Read through there, the geography, what are the community needs, all kinds of feasibility of different solutions. And then certainly all of these are looking forward, so understanding what the current conditions are and where we're going in the future with these. So again, kind of stepping back again, some guiding strategies that Clean Water Services has. This is not only in preparation of master plans, but really in our everyday operations and activities. So everything we do should tie to these strategic objectives. As we put the budget together and look at our different programs, we always tie them back to the district's strategic objectives. Those are organizational excellence. A lot of things, how can we go about doing our jobs better, make our divisions better? Integrated water resource management and resilient watershed. And it's all about a healthy watershed. That's all about. Again, we're working with our partners. We want to be a contributor to the region's environmental and economic vitality. We're always working with the cities and both their planning departments, their economic development departments. We want to be part of the call in that way. Research, innovation, and recovery, and resource recovery. Again, we're more than just about clean water, but it's all the resources, and the ones that are tied to water, but others as well. The energy generation that we do at the treatment plants, and how can we continue our innovation and research to contribute to that. And then our partnerships. We talk a lot about our partners. So it's with the industry, with ag, it's with the cities. So catalyzing those transformational partnerships. So it's more than just transactional, but really transformational, and how we work with our partners. And the master planning is all part of that. We look at these master plans, again, with those strategic objectives in mind. But then as we get to these master planning levels, we talk about the sanitary basin master plans. West Basin is what we're talking about today. We talk about the East Basin, worked on 2021, approved 22. And then the sub-basin planning, which I kind of mentioned, which dovetails with this, which deals with the stormwater management, the ecological enhancement, the local plans. The cities also work on both sanitary and stormwater plans for their communities. We are a part of those. So they aren't doing those in a vacuum. We're interacting and contributing to their work. And then again, looking at our sub-basin strategies, looking at the watershed scale. And then one that we were talking more and more about and really becoming part of what we do, not just not at all as a sidelight, but really part of our strategic approach now is the recycled water plan. So working on the planning efforts for that. And again, these all dovetail together, but hopefully that kind of addresses some of the things that we kind of skipped or glossed over back in the summer when we dove right into the West Basin plan. Hopefully gives a broader overall perspective on how they fit together. And with that, I'll turn it over to Josh, who can dive into what's happening in phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So when we kicked off the West Basin Master Plan, we developed some goals through a charting process. Those were to improve watershed health, have a plan that can adapt to uncertainty, set a vision for the future, be community-based, be cost-effective, and be resilient. And I understand these goals might seem a little generic and that they would apply to any plan, and to an extent they do, but they are also important. They seem like they can apply to any plan because they're critical and they're kind of our guiding lights for this plan. So improving watershed health means meeting our permit, but also being stewards of the river. We want a plan that can adapt to uncertainty. So if development pressure materializes differently than we anticipate, a good plan will not really be with stranded assets. One plan where you can be flexible and adapt as development occurs. The vision for a future really means setting out a roadmap so we know, in time, what projects we can anticipate. So we're not flat-footed, trying to scramble to get something important done because we didn't anticipate it. Community-based, we want to incorporate the values of the community into the plan. Cost effectiveness really means getting the most for our money. So making sure the projects we deliver or build in the plan deliver the most value. And being resilient can mean being resilient both seismically, resilient to climate change, and really just anticipating those things those planning as best we can for those events that may occur. So drilling down a little bit on the West Basin itself, we developed population projections or using data from Portland State University, Population Demographic Center, Metro, and then we truthed out those projections working with our co-implementer cities. And that's kind of how we built up population projections and looked at, where within the West Basin do we really expect development to occur. So the kind of shaded area, I know this is a busy slide with all the call outs, but the shaded areas here kind of show where either residential or industrial development is expected. So some key areas that we're really focused in on are the Jackson School West and Jackson School East areas in North Hillsborough. That's the purple and magenta area there, just south of the highway, as well as the North Plains area on the other side of the highway, Banks, and then a few areas to the south here.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
How do you guys treat the undesignated reserve areas that aren't urban, that aren't rural, that might come in the future, but we're not quite sure? Or are you even down to that level at this point?
I truthfully don't know there, Andy. I don't know if that might be more up your alley.
No, it's a good question. We do look at those. We do, the level of planning for them isn't nearly as far along as the areas that are in the even the urban reserve. There's some idea of less in the undesignated, but we acknowledge that the undesignated area is likely probably a little bit further out. So we do some planning for those areas as well.
Just to make sure we're not creating any roadblocks that would get in the way. We're not building anything for them, but we're planning for them.
Right. you have to acknowledge what the drainage basin is, and whether it encompasses those areas, where those areas might actually.
We do have, this thinking, right? So infrastructure can last 50 to 100 years, but yet our land use planning is done in 20-year increments, right? So the team meets the needs for the currently developed area and the currently planned area to meet land use, right, and comprehensive plan. But the team is also thinking about how this could potentially grow way, way into the future. Well, we can't have it in our 20-year plans to meet the comprehensive plan. This team is already thinking ahead. So we talk about ridgetop to ridgetop a lot. But that's why it's so important to have these plans that are living documents, and that it's going to live and grow with us. And so the team is very futurist in their thinking, but yet very practical about what it's implemented. So I love that cluster. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, so just maybe to give an example of that, in our planning, our planning horizon, we do a 20-year planning horizon that's kind of setting out a CIP, but we do projections out to 2075. Just again, to make sure we're not doing something that boxes ourselves in, is short-sighted in missing out on what some of those future needs might be. So as we develop the plan, we kind of step through, first this phase of developing up the population projections and flow projections, looking out into the future. We identify where the pinch points or bottlenecks are, when a development would lead to a need to upgrade infrastructure or do a project as a plan. And then as we enter phase two, we're looking at each of those specific needs and kind of doing an alternatives evaluation on each of those to select an alternative that we plan around in terms of, financial planning and, working with the other treatment processes to really base our CIP around. So that involves a financial analysis, but we also look at non-financial criteria. So some of those are summarized here, and I think this is probably an area where, if CWAC has feedback, we'd really like to hear that. So one thing we consider is the benefit to the watershed. This can mean, are we taking the best approach to flow management in the river? And are we taking advantage of opportunities for ecological enhancement? So if we have two choices of where we can put a pipeline and one gives us a chance for ecological uplift, that might be more consideration of that alternative. Resilience, and this really dovetails to our plan goals, but we want to be resilient to climate changes in the future. We also want to be to improve our overall seismic resilience. So that could mean not routing a pipeline through a seismic hazard area, or if you don't have that choice, maybe making sure we're using resilient infrastructure in that area, and really, making those resilient investments where they get us the most bang for our buck. We want to incorporate equity and community-based considerations. So this can be things like our rate structure. It's also making sure that underrepresented communities don't bear too much burden on for infrastructure upgrades. So a pump station, maybe an underrepresented community isn't the best place for that. Even though there might be other reasons where you may have options there, and you want to make sure that you're making sure that the underrepresented communities don't bear too much of that burden. We want to incorporate opportunities for reuse, as well as be cognizant of emerging contaminants and what our treatment processes might need to do in the future. And then, of course, we do consider costs. So that can be both the upfront capital cost, as well as the investment in the future and the overall life cycle cost of the piece of infrastructure that might last, 25, 50 years. So like Rick mentioned at the start, we have been working with the CWAC subcommittee, specifically on the plan, and I think Logan's gonna touch on that, or
I have one slide tonight, so bear with me. Mark, Matt, I think a really interesting aspect of your question is, we just gave you an example talking about the future, but also there's a lot of people that are behind this and the work that we're building on. So recently, a great example was given related to the East Basin Master Plan, where as part of the fundamental review of what we're doing, it required us to review a 1968 plan for that same region. And what we found was remarkably, I mean, you think about how the number of units per acre has changed from the 1960s to the 2020s. And what we found was that their planning effort was so strong in the 60s that it was incredibly close. So when we talk about accuracy and precision, it was very accurate. It wasn't the most precise, but it gave us a strong foundation to understand how decisions were made in the 1960s that are affecting us now in 2020. And what was particularly interesting was one of the issues that they alluded to in that plan. They said, well, we don't have the resources to deal with it today, so we know that a future agency, and this predates the existence of USA and Clean Water Services. So what I always appreciate about those planning documents is it shows how that sense of duty and responsibility transcends the decades, right? And it was just yet another example in my career that shows prior proper planning and a really great result. So to that end, I think I'd really like to thank Andy for his opening comments regarding kind of providing that big picture, because when we did start off this summer, you know, we're all busy and we start thinking about, well, what's the West Basin Master Plan? Here's what we're thinking. And I really want to commend Andy. Thank you for agreeing to serve on the budget committee, because I want you all to recognize how important your voice is on CWAC and how seriously we take your concerns and your comments, because you represent a broad swath of the community. And it's important for us that we get busy with our day-to-day to understand what some of those broader issues are. So since we last met in the summer, we had a formal committee meeting where we had a discussion with Mark, Andy, and Elaine, and reviewed some of these more detailed concepts about the West Basin Master Plan, how it is developed, and Andy gave you a good review of some of those broader concepts. We then had a second follow-up discussion that was more casual. It was intended to address some of the more specific comments and concerns that were expressed by the committee members. And I was particularly pleased because even Glenn chose to participate in that discussion to make certain that, again, we truly understood what the concerns were from our environmental representatives. What I'd like to do at this time is, I don't want to blather on, but I prefer to turn it over to Elaine and Andy, Mark, to see if you have any comments that you would like to add related to the discussions that have occurred.
Can I take it off?
Sure.
Okay. First off, I want to thank Logan and the rest of the staff for their for listening to my questions, responding to my questions. I had a lot of things I wanted to get clarity around, and the staff did a great job and were very responsive to that. I came at this from, you know, the hat that I wear as an environment rep, because the Tualatin River has a lot of issues. It has low flow. There are farmers in the basin who lose their access to irrigation in the middle of summer because there's not enough water in the river. Fish need cold, high quality water. Wildlife needs water. People want water to paddle on and be around. So for all those reasons, I was trying to look at this master plan through a lens of are there alternatives for the location of improvements and the type of improvements that get made that may influence some of these factors in the river that are so important? Temperature, flow, dissolved oxygen, and other things like that. What I learned was, as much as I wanted to connect these dots and draw some nice lines between them, I could not do it. This is not a easy linear kind of model where I could look at this West Basin master plan and just immediately go, oh, it should go here, you should do this. And I have a greater understanding for the complexity of the river and the complexity of the work that Clean Water does as well. I do continue to kind of press at Clean Water because you folks have, the agency has some of the greatest influence on the river and the greatest opportunity to benefit the river of any other agency or user anywhere in this basin. And so I'm going to keep my charge and stay true to that. I don't really have a lot else to say, except that I do appreciate the time. I do continue to want to press that we connect wherever possible this West Basin Master Plan to opportunities to benefit the river and opportunities to benefit communities. I do want to put in a comment regarding environmental justice and equity, in that I like to see the thinking go beyond avoiding bearing the brunt of maybe a noisy facility behind a neighborhood or inequitable rates, to think about community benefits. You know, I bring up Forest Grove all the time, but that wetland treatment is a community benefit. It's an amenity. People go walking, people go birding. It is a wonderful gift to the community. And so wherever there is an opportunity to work with these plans, you know, whether there's space in a facility for a community garden, for a refugee community, just keep thinking about that and try to weave that into the plan. And I think that's all I have to say. Andy, Mark?
You know, we had a few just break it down a little bit more. You know, there's kind of like 3 legs of the West Basin plan. You know, it's like wastewater treatment, reuse, and stormwater, and how do you kind of deal with all 3 of those effectively and like in volume. There was also kind of discussion that, you know, what facility is the best one. You know, there was thoughts, is Hillsborough a good alternative? We also kind of looked at Rock Creek, which is currently in operation, you know, that has the infrastructure and has the volume to handle the expansion of the West Basin Master Plan. And there was another kind of interesting discussion around the current permit that allows like a demonstration project through Dairy Creek, where they can reuse water on natural lands. And maybe Logan or Andy wants to talk more to that. But there's also kind of discussion about like how Hillsborough's facility is maybe too small to be an alternative, and kind of all under this broader scope of, you know, what benefits the river the most, what benefits the people the most, while being able to handle the ball.
Yeah, I just offer the subcommittee discussions, both meetings just continue to increase my confidence in the professionals and you and your team and the work that's being done. And how responsive you have been to Elaine's questions and some of the dialogue that's been going back and forth on email, as well as there in person. I just really appreciate the focus on it. And I'm confident, you know, with the scorings that we've seen, that in my opinion, the right factors are being considered and weighed, and that you've got the best interests of not only the river, but the residents and the community at heart. So I really appreciate the hard work and the direction this is heading.
Thank you. I hope what you all continue to hear, and it's something that Diane has reinforced in many discussions. CWS is a learning organization. We learn from you, we learn from each other, we learn from the community, and we really take pride in being a learning organization because we don't want to be the ones that say this is the solution, right? What we want to be are the ones that say these are options that should be considered, and to work with you and others to help us define ultimately what we can do together in a collaborative way and a learning way so that we benefit many different and diverse interests. So I thank you for your comments. It's been a great experience, and I'm really looking forward to the next several stages, future upcoming discussions, and this team continuing to challenge and engage us to think beyond where we are today and where we will be going into the future. So thank you. With that, I'll put it back to Ben.
I really appreciate those comments, and Elaine, you're really resonating with who Clean Water Services aspires to be, right? So it's really integrating the gray infrastructure, the green infrastructure, but also the team pulse fluid infrastructure. And I really understand because the solutions that are cost effective are found across that landscape and how to integrate it together. So I was texting with the team that I want to talk to them about some of these other natural systems things that Jared Kinnear has been really thinking about, because it's all about how we return water, not only to the river, but it's to really the whole landscape of this region that's going to be important. I mean, as our climate changes. So I really appreciate your comments. I totally get it. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Mark. But yeah, this team is a very thoughtful team. You think about it. I think we can figure out ways to really describe it and amplify it even more. So thank you.
I guess before we wrap here, just an update on the activities of phase 2 of the plan, which is ongoing. So for the treatment plan evaluation, we've completed the evaluation for the Rock Creek facility. Again, that's based on the population and industrial growth projections, as well as our understanding of anticipated new regulations that might be coming down during the period. And we've identified where in the plant the capacity bottlenecks are, and then when during that planning period they occur. So, you know, there's whether those are 5 years from now or about 15 years. What do we need to be planning for in our CIP? So upcoming work for the treatment evaluation, we're going to finish the capacity evaluations for the other 2 facilities. And then we really move down to that next phase of the plan, which is drilling down to individual capacity bottlenecks and evaluating the alternatives for those, and then developing out our capital program from that. On the conveyance side, we're in a similar place where we've completed the system model. So in addition to the growth pressures, we've also looked at climate change projections there, as well as, you know, and how that affects our expected rainfall pattern, which in turn, you know, influences the inflow and infiltration, which is a big driver of flow through the system. We've also identified condition issues in the system, you know, where this pipeline or pump station hitting the end of its anticipated useful life, and identified where those capacity limits are. So we're at the same place kind of in both tracks here, where we're starting to drill down into those individual alternative evaluations. On the conveyance side, that looks like you know, evaluating where new pipelines may go or replacement pipelines may go, where new pump stations may be sited, and then coordination with cities, and kind of also incorporating these non-cost factors that we talked about.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Were your growth, so I'm assuming the growth assumptions between the West Basin and the East Basin plants were a lot more growth anticipated in the West Basin. Maybe that's not the case, but also the the factor that influences it is the middle housing piece and the fact that we had a legislative change that basically added 4 times more density potentially in a lot of places. So I'm curious what your growth assumptions were between the two plans, and were they dramatically different?
Yeah, I don't, I'm trying to recall off the top of my head where we see the most, growth. I think our, on a percentage basis, at least, the biggest residential growth was toward the west end of the basin. Whereas the east end closer to Rock Creek was, that was more driven by the industrial growth. Yeah, as far as how that compared to the East Basin, I think I need to look at the plans to get back to you there.
I guess, did you guys take into account middle housing?
Yes.
That's the simpler question.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was a reality. Toward the tail end, East Basin Master. Try to relook at this. We can go back, and Chris Faulkner, if he was here, would be able to that spot.
I'm just curious. So
And I think we, and of course, it's part of the equation for the West Basin. A lot of that is really incorporated in our discussions with the cities. They're actually doing the land use plans. So there were some assumption changes from the beginning to the end. And we got back with them and said, well, now we're starting to see some applications come in and their developers are proposing middle housing. So we saw some areas, Cooper Mountain was one where they were thinking initially 4,000 units, and now they're talking it could be 5,600. So yeah, we've had a lot of those discussions.
I think you'll start, we are just now have our land use for a middle housing project where we had 16 lots, and now we're gonna build 23 houses. And I think you'll see within the urban area, a lot of that over the next 20 years for sure.
Where is that?
It's over by Jedgeport High School.
Okay.
So looking ahead here, we've got, I think, 2 more check-ins scheduled with CWAC. Next one's anticipating May. So at that point, we should have proposed alternatives for most of our organizations, as well as cost-based and non-cost-based scoring that we can update CWAC on. I think at that point, we'd be looking for input on the implementation plans, as well as crafting our executive briefing. We're planning on another update in July. That would be an update on alternative selection. Then early 2025 is when we're planning on board action to adopt the master plan. For the subcommittee, those aren't shown here, unfortunately, but generally speaking, I think we're planning on meeting with the subcommittee about a month ahead of each of these check-ins. So I believe that's all we have. There's any other questions or discussion, happy to.
How granular do you get in terms of ways and means? Like, I mean, I hear you say a lot of capital projects, but you identify what you expect the private sector to bear and what the capital projects that we pay for by CWS or the cities are. I mean, do you get down to that level?
Yeah, so I think that generally comes out of a rate study, which would be the next step past the master plan. So what the master plan gets us is a CIP for the next 20 years, and then that's considered along with our current rate structure and development to say, okay, this new development should pay for new capacity, whereas rehabilitating our existing infrastructure is something that would be a rate. But generally speaking, the rate study is kind of the next thing beyond the CIP.
Is there any contemplation done about development agreements for the private sector? I occasionally do this where a developer or even a group of developers comes in and says, you know what, we'll put this pump station in for you. We'll put this line. We don't want to wait for your budget process. We'll let you design it, or we'll design it to your specs. We'll pay for it and get paid back as the latecomers come in. Has there been talk about that?
Yeah, so we can use the development agreement tool. There's lots of tools. So the team talks about a rate study. What really comes next is the financial planning and the sequencing of the capital. And then the development community is critical here to be able to.
Yeah, if you make allowances for those development agreements, it can speed things up a lot, take some of the burden off of you, obviously. You know, I've been privy to a few of them, and there's gonna be some in your future, but a lot of cities that don't have allowances for it, they don't have stuff, you know, they don't have the ability to adapt to that. And so I want to bring it up because, you know, there is a shortage of, especially industrial land, which is what I do a lot of. There's an acute shortage of it. And there's a lot of people that are willing to spend a lot of capital money up front to get that developed. You're going to witness it probably out in West Union. You're going to come. And in Sherwood, probably.
Great strategy discussion.
It is, and it's like I say, I run into roadblocks with it all the time. Because, well, we can't do that because we're going to do an LA, we've got a budget, but well, you know what? Save your local improvement bonding for something else and let a private developer go in there and bear the brunt of it.
We happen to hear I sent out the template document twice in the last month to developers who are working on infrastructure.
Here. Industrial area, though?
One of them is, yep.
Good. Fourth row. Yeah.
When do we think we're gonna get an update? Because I'm assuming that kind of the sub-basin work that Chris is still working on the sub-basin stuff, right? The sub-basin planning work. When do we see an update to that? Because that seems like a logical continuation of this presentation. Here, I'm just curious.
I don't know if we have it planned. I mean, I think that's a good point.
I'm curious as to what he's working, like as far as what he's finding, where there are opportunities to do resilience work and string
When
corridor.
you say Chris, Chris Goodfellow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Make sure.
because that, the genesis of a lot of that was several years back. We were talking about doing the sub-basin work and now that it's being referred to, I guess, in this document, it would be interesting to kind of see what he's been working on.
I've been working with the cities as they do their planning because the bulk of the local drainage infrastructure comes from the city. So we're trying to find ways to enable the stream restoration and the resiliency in the creeks to help support development. So that would be good. We can talk internally about the timing. We'd have to go, the board is very interested
Yes.
in sub-basin planning. So CWAC is, the team is navigating. I think they're learning a lot, working in Tigard, at Red Rock Creek, and some other places. So we should, I think a good start would be to talk about what we have learned, what works and what isn't working.
Is any of his work focused on the unincorporated areas?
Right now, it's mainly focused on the development areas that are being triggered.
The expansion.
Yes. Beavertown.
Beavertown, yeah, Tigard.
Yeah.
But you're right, the ultimate strategy is to get ahead.
Yes.
Right, like we did in Chicken Creek, to be able to get ahead to restore the creek before development even gets there, yeah. And to be able to do the reserves and things that we need to do. But, yeah.
Well, the planning areas, because the cities are involved, and obviously because the district's involved, but they have the organization to focus and solve problems. The unincorporated areas don't have that, so they have the CWS. And so getting some attention by the district in those areas would be great. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're on to Tracy, the 2024 state. Oh, sorry.
Just a really quick follow on. You mentioned Jared Kinnear and some of that work. Are we gonna be able to get a briefing on that sometime in 2024?
That's what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, thank you for all that work.
Sounds great.
Tracy with our legislative update.
Great, thank you. Good evening. I'm Tracy Rainey. I work in the government relations program for the district. So as part of that work, I do both state and federal advocacy, tracking legislation, working with partner organizations as we look to advance priorities for the district at both the state and federal level. a lot of interaction with our legislature, state, and then our federal delegation offices as well. So tonight I'm going to provide an overview of our 2024 state and federal legislative agendas that were recently vetted and adopted by our board. And I will also provide a preview of what we expect to see in the coming year ahead in terms of our advocacy efforts for the district. So Clean Water Services engages in an annual process for development and the adoption of our state and federal legislative agendas. And we just wrapped that process up in the end of 2023 for adoption of both the 2024 state and federal legislative agendas. And that process began back in September as we reviewed our 2023 legislative agendas, looked for items that needed to be revised within that, and then also identified any new items that should be added to either of those agendas. Our first presentation was to our board in October, and then between October and December, we received feedback on the proposed agenda, and then we were able to present that proposed final agendas in December, and the board adopted those at that time. And I should note that we run our process concurrent with the Washington County government relations process of adopting their state and federal legislative agendas, though the board does adopt those as separate agendas. So I am going to provide a preview of what's to come with the state legislature and then jump into the specifics of our state legislative agenda. Okay, so this is my reality that is fast approaching. So we are very, very quickly approaching the 2024 legislative session. It is an even numbered year, so that indicates that this will be a short session as opposed to our 6-month-long legislative sessions that we have in the odd-numbered years. I think it's almost safe to say that the session feels like it's already started. I have a list of about 100 bills to take a look at that are committee bills. I know Mark just looked at me like surprised, like, oh, great. And those are committee bills. So we're just seeing the preview now of what committees are bringing forward. Just as a reminder, there are limits to the number of bills that can be introduced during a short session. So legislators are each allowed 2 bills. And committees will have 3 bills. And there'll be some other bills introduced by agencies or the governor's office. So expect around 300 bills probably to review and track this legislative session. The date to officially kind of introduce legislation is January 12th. And so we will expect that we can see the wide array of those 300 bills probably around the week of January 22nd. We never know exactly when they're going to be posted to the legislature website, but it will be in the coming weeks. And then we will be reviewing all of those bills to see where there may be impacts for Clean Water Services and then try to figure out exactly how it is that we'll go about responding. I did note on here there's a potential for omnibus packages. Seems to be kind of a new thing the legislature is doing more frequently, which is putting together larger packages of bills on big ticket items like housing or water. We saw that in the 2023 legislative session with a drought package that passed. Towards the end of session, it rolled up probably 10 to 12 different bills that were being considered into one larger package of overall investment. So we expect that we may see a few of those advancing in this legislative session. I will be jumping now into our state guiding principle. So our agenda always includes a guiding principle, and that helps us review legislation, determine whether we're going to engage as an entity or take a position on the bill. The guiding principle is intended to be broad, especially when you look and compare it to our state legislative priority items that are more specific. So this allows us to be a little bit more nimble and flexible, as especially we review legislation that we maybe didn't anticipate for the session. Okay, so jumping into our specific state legislative priorities for the coming session. We have 8 of them total, so the first 4 on this slide. Kind of a lot of priorities for a short session, but there's been a lot that has been going on. So the first item on here is the supporting additional investment in water-related infrastructure. We modified this priority item. It's been an ongoing priority for the district, and We will be for a very long time, as we know that we need additional investment in water infrastructure. The modification that we made was to recognize the need for additional investment to build capacity to support community growth. At the same time, we wanted to make sure that it's very clear that we still need investment in those core water quality projects and infrastructure investments that protect public health and the environment, as well as investments in existing systems, maintenance operations, not so much operations, but maintenance of those systems. We've got a lot of aging infrastructure across the state, including for clean water services. So we want to make sure as the legislature looks at infrastructure investment that they're not running away from those really core investments that we know we need in exchange for something like housing. We want to see them do both of those things. The next item on this list is a carryover item from the 2023 legislative session. We were working with the Association of Clean Water Agencies, which is a statewide association that we work closely with on investments for OSU to conduct a study of the fate and transport of PFAS, so per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. In terms of biosolids applications, so land applications specifically. That bill advanced pretty far in the session. It was well received and then got stuck in the Ways and Means Committee, and the casualty really of the timing and the quorum denial that we saw last legislative session is a lot of bills got stuck in Ways and Means. So that bill is going to be coming back to the session. We're going to continue our advocacy effort around supporting investment to help promote water infrastructure readiness that will support industrial and commercial expansion opportunities. I'm sure many of you saw the news release. The first 3 companies are receiving federal CHIPS Act contracts. And really this is a reflection of that work. We've been working really closely with our partner cities, City of Hillsborough and North Plains as well. Just in recognition that with those potential expansions, that there's going to be significant infrastructure that's going to be associated. And there may be some expectations that that infrastructure is delivered on a fairly quick timeline. So we're communicating with the legislature to make sure that we are fully prepared and that there's investment to follow. Preserving local infrastructure financing tool, that's been another long-standing item on our agenda, and really just making sure that we have all the financing tools that we need to make the investments in our infrastructure as a district. Okay, these are the last 4 items for our state priorities. The first item on here is around water reuse, and this is a continuation from the 2023 session. We had really good success in 2023 with advancing a bill that requires DEP to update their regulatory framework for water reuse. So that bill did pass. It was actually incorporated into that drought package that I mentioned earlier. So they are initiating that work now. So we're continuing to work as that's implemented and looking for any recommendations that may come from that work in terms of additional incentives or barriers to implementing projects that may need to be removed. So this one could become something where it informs potential 2025 legislation. Supporting efforts to enhance water utility responsiveness and resiliency. This one is a little bit broader for us, but would touch on things like, for example, emerald ash borer, and making sure that there's the investments that are needed to support work around those pieces, but it's also broader to see issues that can impact the district. The third item on that list, advocating for continuation of low-income household assistance. We had a bill we introduced in the 2023 legislative session. It, again, got pretty far in the process and got stuck up in Ways and Means. But this would be for state supplemental funding that would continue the recently enacted federal program that we saw in 2021. So Congress enacted a program for the first time ever for low-income water rate assistance, kind of like we see LIHEAP as a assistance program. That money went really quickly, the money that came to Oregon. And in Washington County, they got about $1 million and it was spent down in 4 months. So it just demonstrates the need that we see. So we are going to continue telling that story and seeing if there's any opportunity for state funding. And then finally, the last one is a new one this year for us, ensuring that policies to promote housing are protective of public health and the environment. and specifically with Clean Water Act requirements. So there's a lot of conversations around housing right now. I'm sure that everyone is aware of that. And we're just wanting to make sure that any of those discussions around increasing housing production don't inadvertently run us afoul of water quality permits. So we should be able to find pathways that allow for both housing production and making sure we can comply with the Clean Water Act. So I think I'll pause and see if there's any questions on the state piece before I jump to the federal.
On that last one, can you go back to that last one? What was it specifically that you saw that caused, like what proposals were you seeing that brought it to such a radar point that it needed to be stated?
It was a bill that was introduced last year from the governor's office at House Bill 3414. That bill allowed for certain exemptions, essentially design variance kind of opportunities. And initially when the bill was drafted, the language was vague enough that it caused some heartburn that a city could interpret that certain design and construction standards, for instance, may be misinterpreted as up for variance consideration. And so we worked with the governor's office and DEQ, and the language was adjusted at the end of the session, and that bill died on the last day of session. It failed by one vote. So we know that bill is going to come back this legislative session. It's broadened a bit, so we're seeing a bit of an expansion of what that is, but still having good conversations with the governor's office about keys.
Let me add a little bit. You correct me if I'm wrong. And look at Diane here too. The issue is there's some parts of our design and construction standards, right, we have in place related to compliance with permit. So there was a situation where trying to get a variance of something that would put Diane in jail, right? We would risk our permit, the compliance with permit piece. And I think the intention of that idea, the variance piece was really good, but I think the governor's office, they were very responsive to us, saying, oh, no, we don't need to be. DEQ tells you have to do this, and now we're telling you don't have to do it, even though you get to your permit. So just try to line those things up. That was specifically what the issue was.
And kind of the ambiguity of whether we could end up in court arguing what the legislative intent was or what the language actually meant. So just
The intent was to address the land use issues.
It was.
Engineering.
It was, yeah. So it was more the language piece than whether that kind of got us there. So again, governor's office was really responsive and said we have no intention of running you afoul of any water quality permits. So.
I'm curious, it's 3414, I'm glad you brought that up. We were working on that with a number of statewide environmental organizations because we were worried about setback and wetlands and such. How much do you work with you work with your statewide consortium? How much do you work with other sectors to look at bills where there's commonality between them? I'm thinking the PFAS one in particular, because that's one that we're also looking at, we're concerned about. And how does that process play out?
Yeah, we do work really closely with a variety of stakeholder organizations, depending on the issue. Mainly we're working really closely with Special Districts Association, just as a local government entity. They're typically involved in tracking legislation, including in particular to water quality issues. The Oregon Association of Clean Water Agencies, they have a legislative committee that I chair, and so they're meeting kind of leading into session and throughout pretty frequently to review bills. But I know there's, depending again on the issue like PFAS bill, I know the Oregon Environmental Council is involved in that one. So any opportunity where we can work across stakeholder groups for alignment and support. So.
I had a question about the water utility responsiveness and resiliency. Is there a big need in the smaller communities or like the municipalities within Clean Water's jurisdiction to, do they need upgrades of some of their systems? This may dovetail more with the stormwater work, but I'm just remembering a bad storm. Our spring storms are getting much more severe than they used to be. And I remember driving through Portland once where the water was coming up through the manholes instead of going down. And is that part of this that you're talking about, or is it something else?
And yeah, I would say it would be included within that. There's nothing that we're bringing forward proactively in that regard right now. Again, especially considering we're heading into short session. So the proactive items we're working on are pretty limited at this point, but you know, this would catch anything that did support additional investment, especially in those smaller communities that we see in reflecting climate change impacts and all of those pieces.
Any questions?
Okay, I'm now going to shift into our federal legislative preview. So similar to the state legislative agenda, we have federal, I should say, we have federal guiding principles. There's multiple on the federal side, just because of the wide array of issues that we would get involved in. These guiding principles are the same and carried over from the 2023 legislative agenda. So there weren't any revisions that were made for this year. As you know, there wasn't a lot of progress with with Congress last year. So a lot of the things that we're working on were carried over to the 2024 agenda. But really this is, we use this as an opportunity to, again, decide which issues we're going to engage in terms of our advocacy work, and then also to prioritize our efforts and our time. So moving into the specific priorities.
We have a question on the line.
Oh.
What am I? Go ahead, Ramesh.
Yeah, I'm still playing catch up, so excuse me if this is a repeat question. So a lot of these federal and state legislative priorities, I'm assuming a lot of them have overlap with water supply issues and topics. Is there some way you guys are working with some of those representatives on some of these legislative priorities?
That's a great question. We do work really closely with our partners, our partner cities that would be providing water supply, and share our legislative agendas with all of them. So we are frequently connecting in that regard. And then the statewide groups I talked about, like Special Districts Association, have water supply as part of the work that they do as well. So there's not really too many that on the state side that I think there's definitely none that are in conflict with water supply. So there may be some where they would lend their support on an issue, but yeah, we do coordinate wherever it seems appropriate.
And I'm assuming there are no conflicts or you're working against each other and that kind of high level stuff.
Yeah, and that's why we do share on our information, our agendas with each other. They share theirs as well, so that we kind of make sure. And we meet very frequently with the government relations teams of other jurisdictions just to make sure we all know what each other is up to. Great question. Okay, so in the federal legislative priorities, so advancing seismic modification for Stockton's Dam, this should be an issue that's familiar to most. It's been a longstanding priority for the district. As you probably recall, in 2021, we made the decision to forego additional stored water, an expansion of the facility, and to instead support the investment for the seismic modification only of the facility. So making the modifications to the existing dam, really that decision was the result of a variety of factors, and Mark can probably jump in here and add them, but one being the public safety concern and just really needing to make sure that we are protecting the region's water supply. The cost of additional storage was very expensive. We had modeling that showed that there are more cost-effective opportunities to meet our thermal compliance. And then as well, there was in 2021, passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that had additional funding for the dam safety program that would allow for the acceleration of the dam safety only project. And so we did make that decision in 2021 to move forward with the dam safety only project. And we are seeing real progress. That was asked by our board recently, this has been on the agenda for a long time. Are we seeing any progress? And the answer is yes, that we are. They're expecting to have the environmental design work done by 27, 28, and then start construction in 2029 with completion in 2035. So it's going to be a significant investment in this region. The price tag on that project is now at $900 million, a split between federal and local dollars for that project, where we're at 15% shared with our local repayment partners.
It's a nice, right, where it's 85%.
It is nice.
So that's good. The other thing is I want to speak to Ramesh, what you're talking about, coordination with water supply. Scoggins is the region's primary water supply right now, right? And one of the other changes in terms of that shift and just move forward on the dam safety only was that the drinking water supply with putting the straw in the Willamette, their next major incremental supply is coming from another location. So part of it is we knew the drinking water folks were taken care of. We recognized that what additional water at Scoggins alone was not going to meet our long-term regulatory compliance strategies. The most important part probably is it was just very, very expensive for that incremental amount for clean water services. So that's why we're moving to reuse. And then from an agricultural irrigation, the third leg of the water stool there, their focus is really on just make that facility safe, right? Because this is the only important water that supplies ag in the region.
The design of Scoggins actually fits the watershed itself.
Yeah.
So if you raise it, there's actually not enough fill water.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of a kind of a conundrum, so, yeah.
It's still gonna be an earthen dam, I mean, right? I mean,
It is, it's gonna be an earthen dam with lots and lots and lots of giant rocks packed to the back of it. So what they're gonna do is they're just gonna take the dam and put another dam on top of the back of it, but it's gonna be rock. Rock shakes and kind of, yeah, big, yeah. And then they also are tying the toe of the dam itself into bedrock. So they're gonna go down and put in these kind of, if you've been on CWAC long enough, remember the piano key trenches that they're gonna put in to tie the dam into that rock below.
with the rock, not with, no, they're not gonna pour concrete down there.
Yeah, I believe it's there. It's
They're
just,
gonna do
yeah,
pilings.
yeah, they'll do pilings there. And then they'll just put a bunch of rock in the back of the top, 900 million. I mean, by the time they build it,
Yeah.
and I don't want to get off on this too far, but you do think about, you think about $1 billion worth of federal investment that's going to come into the 12th Basin in the next decade. You think about what look at that.
Well, the
What
big
did that
pipes,
look like?
the big
You know?
pipe's $1.6 million, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
This is federal money, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there in the next 10 years.
It's a lot of money.
Where do they think that kind of rock, or that's like what?
We were talking about that, where's this rock?
They were originally gonna do an EA on the project, right? Environmental
Assessment.
assessment. They had to move to an EIS in part from what we heard because the borrow area was just more complex than they thought it was gonna be.
What's that mean?
That where they're gonna dig the rock.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, is how they're gonna get it there. That's what I'm wondering about, because I
You gotta build these bridges, you're gonna have, you know.
They gotta get around those tracks. There
Right.
gotta get a track in there,
Yeah.
because there is track out there, right? Yeah.
I do think they have a borrow area with this, but as you look up at the dam, I think it's over. There's an area that they're already looking at.
Borrow is such an interesting word, isn't
It
it?
is.
Yeah.
We'll return it when we're done.
Right, right.
You fill it back up.
I see a big hole there.
Get more volume because I had to borrow the,
You're right. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's, yeah, so I'll just mention to close out on the Scoggins Dam that we are continuing to work, really meeting frequently with our federal delegation, and with the Bureau of Reclamation, just to make sure this project remains a priority. So, and just that we are continuing to see updates if there's any change in the timeline. Because obviously we want this project to get done as soon as possible. So the other priorities I'll go through quickly on this slide. A lot of them are similar to the state priorities that we talked about, just areas where we see there being a need for both state and federal investment, water reuse being one of those areas. So we're advocating for a variety of funding opportunities, including a new pilot program for EPA, an alternative water supply source grant program. So we're working really closely with the National Water Reuse Association on that advocacy effort. Again, just supporting further investment in water-related infrastructure. We've seen a lot of good steps made in the right direction. 2021 was really significant for water investment. But again, a lot of investment is coming through in loan form. And so There is a huge need for additional funding in grants, even if there's match requirements for those grants. So we're making that case and advocating in that regard as well. And then again, advocating for that low income water assistance program. So there is a bill I just received from our federal lobbyist to review for making the program permanent that was initially passed in 2021 to have that first round of funding for that low income assistance. Okay, the last priority is on the federal agenda. So supporting ongoing funding for natural resource conservation, technical assistance and incentives. This really points to the Farm Bill. Farm Bill is renewed every 5 years. So it was supposed to be passed in 2023. And as you know, we're now operating under continuing resolution. So Congress has not passed new budget bills. So we anticipate the Farm Bill will pass in 2024. We sure hope so. And so the funding that we've seen really being successful in the basin to work with private landowners on conservation is part of that. And then supporting strategies to implement integrated planning approaches for water quality permits. This is really an EPA effort. I don't see that there's probably going to be any particular item that we can support, but if there is, we would be supportive of it. This really enables utilities to think a little bit more comprehensively and to kind of prioritize and implement things like green infrastructure solutions as part of their water quality compliance. And then finally, advocating for policies and regulations that are protective of the environment and human health from exposure to emerging contaminants, and also advocating for producer responsibility in that regard. There's a lot of debates right now about PFAS, as you probably know, and who is liable for cost associated with PFAS contamination. So we're watching those conversations very closely. So that is the federal priorities. Any questions? I think I'll pause there on the priorities before I just jump into kind of our federal preview. And so where are we now? Obviously, I mentioned continuing resolution. We're hearing good progress being made on new budget bills. So we're watching that very closely, in part because we were successful working with Representative Suzanne Amici's office on direct funding for a project in Western Washington County that's in Forest Grove that would benefit Gaston, Cornelius, and Forest Grove as well. And that is for an inflow and infiltration rehabilitation project. So there's $1 million that was included in the Department of Interior budget that is through the State and Tribal Assistance Grant Program. So we are very hopeful that that bill will move forward. It was included in the House version, so now we wait to see whether that is included in the final bill. Our approach on advocacy, federal level, we work really, really closely with a lot of federal associations and on the NACWA Legislative Committee. So we're constantly checking in with them monthly just to see what's on the radar, where we need to be focused. We're going to be continuing our advocacy efforts, and in April again this year, similar to last year, we're going to be heading to DC for Water Week. So any questions on that? I think this may be the last slide. So what we expect for 2024, again, we'll be engaging with federal delegation offices about regarding earmark request opportunities. So they call them different things in the House and Senate now, community project funding or congressionally directed spending, depending on if you're working with the House or Senate. But we will be having conversations about potential opportunities for direct funding for clean water services projects. We'll be continuing our advocacy, of course, on Scoggins Dam. Setting up some delegation tours. They've had a lot of changeover in their district staff, so making sure that they're getting up to the facility, that they know what we're talking about when we say this is the region's primary water supply source. PFAS, we are watching conversations around potential exemption from what's known as CERCLA, and that's speaking to the liability conversation and whether or not we'll be subject to potential Superfund status under CERCLA. So that's one that we're watching really closely. Could have impacts for the utility. Low income assistance, I mentioned the Farm Bill, and then again, the new funding for that pilot program for the water reuse alternative supply source grants. With that, that is covers both the state and federal agenda. So if there's any questions.
When it's not necessarily related to this, one of the buzzes that I keep hearing about is the Supreme Court ruling about water, wetlands specifically, and water that does not flow to a stream.
Water in the state.
And yeah, and I guess it's apparently that the feds have advocated responsibility of that back to the states. Is that correct? Those types of water, of those types of issues?
Yes, there's a couple of them that are going on, right? It's Sackett, right, as it relates to,
Well, I think if I understand right, regardless of what's happening with the federal law, the state of Oregon still has very
Oh, no, absolutely.
protective law.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
You have to deal with the state, but you don't have to deal with the feds. Is
Yeah.
that right?
yeah.
it depends.
It depends, right? So it's still emerging because of Sackett. It's emergent that for us, we worry about a new ruling that happened on Maui. In fact, I grew up in Lahaina. They call it the Maui ruling as it relates to injection wells and the hydraulically connectedness of groundwater to the river. We could even bring Caroline Lobdell, our new GC. She's on top of all of these rulings. Yeah, she knows the stuff in and out. So it's how then it affects us. There's rulings on the BIOP from related to FEMA's work about protecting the salmon and how it impacts land use planning in the floodplain. So there's a lot of rulings and we're really watching to see how it impacts us in the state of Oregon.
Well, that's where I'm going with this. So you still have the Division of State Land, but would you guys get involved in that as well? If somebody goes in for a permit in one of these fill areas that does not flow to a stream, would follow that, so that would you guys be overseeing that as well as the Division of State?
So it's the Division of State Lands, right? Clean Water Services does have design standards that is related to wetlands and wetlands protection. So it's all interrelated.
Buffers is where.
Yeah, they used to call them ghosts, ghost buffers, but those are the things that will be.
What you're filling it up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I'm going. So I would imagine that you guys would oversee the flow process.
No, it'd be DSL, yeah, and the core. Mhm. And then our design and construction standards work with the specific development, yeah. It's a complicated.
Oh, I can
program.
imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys talking about it, right?
And I was disappointed to hear today that Radhika Fox, who we all know really well, is now no longer the deputy administrator in the Office of Water. So she leaves her post in February, and she brought a lot of very grounded advisement to EPA, and it's just the change that's going on. So we're going to miss Radhika and being able to work with her in the Office of Water. So
That's unfortunate.
it really is.
That's who you would communicate with the feds with?
Just to understand what's going on, where's EPA going, what are the meaning of the roles, and, so we'll see who the next person is, but certainly Andrew Sawyer, who's been there for many, many years, we also work with, but, yeah, it's an interesting world now that we live in, yeah.
Elaine, you have a question?
I have, I don't know if it's a quick question or not, only answer if it's a quick one. I'm interested in how an exemption from CERCLA, what's the good and the bad on this? That's curious to me.
I'm trying to think if that's a quick answer to it. I will say, yeah, again, this is about kind of that producer responsibility approach, and us being the passive receiver in that and certainly I think if you talked about Bob Garner, he has great kind of insights into this issue. That's not to say that we have zero responsibility for how we address what we receive, but we are not a producer. And so I think everyone's kind of playing, a lot of people are playing game hot potato in this, including the producers of the chemicals that like to have other people also sharing their liability.
So if it were exempt, would you become more eligible for Superfund funding or?
Not exempt, then we could run the risk of having Superfund kind of designation, yeah, of
If they're, yes.
You're receiving it.
Yes, so the way to think about it is even though we don't produce it, we receive, let's say,
Yeah.
PFAS. So then if you put, especially on the East Coast of Maine, if you put PFAS on the ground as a biosolid and you don't have CERCLA protections, then you could be a CERCLA liable entity. So it puts the public POTW in harm's way. So there's a lot of debate about who's responsible for things like PFAS.
Okay.
But certainly, we have an obligation to know what's in our biosolids, as an example, know what's in our effluent and make sure we're not moving that along the chain. We're lucky here in Oregon because we don't have PFAS primary chemical producers here. That's where they're in a lot of difficulties in many states.
So what's getting into our water is
From
like,
landfills potentially, like
or the old Teflon pans that used to be everywhere and getting washed and rinsed down.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. So Bob and the team do a really good job really monitoring where it's coming from.
Okay.
That might even be an interesting, again, sort of update on what our team is monitoring, how closely we're making sure we're tracking this. So, and Stephanie can take that as a list. That'd be a great conversation about how we're monitoring for PFAS. We're on the leading edge, I think, of PFAS management and talking to people. Our team from our pretreatment group, they went back and talked to even Aqua about how we're doing this. So.
Yeah, the team gave a really fascinating presentation to our SAGE group, our executive team, and it was very impressive and very eye-opening.
So this speaks to how new the members of CWAC are here, because they came and spoke, our regulatory affairs group, on this program that we put in place in 2019. So we knew this was on the horizon and trying to get a sense of where's it coming from? You know, where are, we have a pretty good idea of what the hotspots should be. We don't have any manufacturers here. We're not Maine, we're not Cape Fear, or, you know, areas like that. But there are higher concentration things like leachate from, you know, the landfill over here, for instance.
Airports, yeah. Military training sites. Yeah.
No, I worked at an agency that purchased land that was contaminated by companies that have not been in business for some time, so, yeah.
Like a lot of them down on the Lima River.
Bingo.
Any questions? Great, thank you. So now we have an invitation for public comment. Do you have any members of the public here in person? Everybody here is staff or CWAC. So Stephanie?
Are no members of the public virtually.
Okay. Yeah, well then we'll close that invitation and move on to announcements.
Thank you very much. We won't have a meeting in February. The next scheduled meeting is the 13th of March. So that's 2 months away. So that's all I have.
Okay, there's one more agenda item, which is we want to recognize Jockers for his 32 years of service with clean water. The last 19 years, he's been involved with CWAC, so I think he's been to more meetings than definitely any of us did.
Well,
Oh, yeah. He just won't eat them. I wanted to share a little bit of a personal note about Mark is that I've been around a long time too, as long as him, but I've been around about 25 years. And you always stood out because you were always the best dressed guy in the room, or usually the best dressed guy in the room. But you worked in a clean water as science, engineering, mathematics, and a lot of really difficult to understand things, and that has to interact with government. And so when you have that interaction with the technical side of things in government, somebody needs to be able to simplify it, distill it down, and make it understandable for the layperson. And you have done an excellent job of doing that for your entire career. And you've done it at the highest levels of government. And I think that you are one of the best at doing what you do, probably in this United States of America. So,
Oh, my goodness.
I wanted to just say thank you from our committee, and I would ask that everybody give them a round of applause. There is a gift for you that that was, I don't know if you knew it was coming or not, but this one's for me.
Oh. Go together.
They put together, really, so should I open one?
Yes, you open, please open both.
I will say that there was a note on my kitchen counter today with this, and it said, it's from my wife, it said, please take this to Joe. I thought, first of all, Joe who? And then I figured out who it was Joe, and I thought, why is my wife giving gifts to Joe? It said, P.S. do not look in here. So it made me think it's probably for me. Very nice, yeah. So- Speaking of, so, speaking of fly fishing, this is a very, very nice reel. Goodness gracious, that is incredible.
Where will you be fishing on March 13th?
That's a good question. I'll break the over as it shoots. And as I may have told, as some of you may too, my son works for Sage. He's 2 years out of school. He's worked there for a year now as a parking manager. So I was just up there. So my goodness gracious. Oh, really? Holy cow. Is this a metal tube? Or is there something in it? Oh my goodness. Oh, this is so incredibly generous of you all. That is so nice. Thank you very much. I know, man, take this back to Australia. I'm sure they have fish there too. Oh, goodness.
I took a tube like that to Australia once, yeah, with my fishing rod. And
Oh, this is just incredible. Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow. That is a very nice, yeah, an R8. These are relatively new, very new. Oh, thank you so much. This is just such a shock. So nice of you. So I want to tell you one thing that you talked about translate. It's really about translating. I was hired here in 1991 to run our environmental education program, to run something called the River Rangers program with fourth graders. So I would talk to fourth graders about wastewater treatment and water resource management. And what I tell people is I still have the same job, right? And I'm using almost the same words. And so the fourth graders and the people I talk to now are pretty much still the same. I know when we go into an office on the hill, we kind of use the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I went and looked you up today on LinkedIn just to see what your background was.
Yeah.
And I saw you have a journalistic degree.
Yeah.
Number 4. So do I, so.
Oh, yeah. 1986.
Yeah, might as well laugh for that.
Well, this is very generous. Well, I really do appreciate it. And I'm not joking. Mike, as some of you may or may not know, was the city representative on CWAC for many years. And it's one of the reasons that Mike knows so much about, like, for formation of the stormwater containment pieces like that. So he has been here. I'm not gonna be able to top out our Commissioner Roy Rogerson. So. I know. Who knew? He was a newbie when I started practically, right? So thank you very much. It's just been a real pleasure. And I have been working with this committee. It's interesting, probably for about 19 years now. So it's really one of the joys and privileges of my career to be able to work with community members and stuff like that. And, George has had 2 terms here, so I've gotten to know him over the years, 5 years ago too, so.
Any idea how many CWAC members you probably look at, if you had to guess? We should have figured that out. Sorry.
I know, we should have. Well, I know, there's a lot. It really has been a lot. And Mike can talk about, it used to be called USAC, right? Unified Sewerage Agency Advisory Commission. And what did you change? I will also tell you, not that this will give you, maybe you can think about this too. We have two members that went on to become Washington County Commissioners. No, not Roy.
Oh, just a second.
Bob Terry.
That's
Oh.
right.
Terry was on with USAC committee.
Who's that? Jason, you be better.
You know, the filing is still out there. That's right. With the District 4.
Mark, you're gonna be the third, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I live in the Basin, but I live about 8 blocks outside of Washington.
Oh.
Otherwise, you better believe I'd be in here. So.
Mike, I didn't mean to shortchange you, but I've been old fishing pole, I'll give you.
Go ahead. I'm fine. I'm just.
All right,
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
and I think our meeting's adjourned.
Diane, not that Mark can ever truly be in compliance, but you have any updates for us on?
Yeah, so we're in the middle of interviews, so,
Yeah, actually, next week, we have a second round, we're gonna plan. Applicant, all very solid. You're right, Mark can't be replaced, but we have a very solid pool of applicants and we'll have those interviews next week and we may get down to 1 or 2 finalists that will go on. So we're getting close.
So we
Mark,
should hopefully meet them at the March meeting.
in a perfect world, yes.
We'll see. We'll see, time flies.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Thank you, everybody.
Right.
Everyone.
Move it.